Hey guys, I rescued this lawnmower from my neighbor's trash last year, and I'm gonna see if I can fix it up and get it running and then sell it on Craigslist. It looks like it's in pretty good shape. It doesn't seem to have any major problems. It's very lightweight, which is nice. It has the bag. It's not self-propelled, which is gonna be a bummer using it in my yard, but if you have a small yard, it'll be a good machine for you, assuming I can get it running. So I already poked around with it a little bit and I was able to get it running off of starter fluid, but after a few seconds of that, it started to spit oil out of the air intake. So, freaking helicopters. So I checked the oil and the oil looks brand new, but it's way overfilled. So I'm gonna drain the oil and drain the gas and see if I can just get it started with some fresh fuel and fresh oil. Yeah, that's way overfilled. It's like 2 inches above the line. So if you look at the oil after I wipe it on the paper towel, it's still golden. So I don't think this oil's ever been used. There's just way too much of it. So normally I like to warm up the motor before I drain the oil. Once it's warmed up, the oil's gonna flow better and it's gonna drain out a little easier. But on this machine, I can't do that. So I'm just gonna drain it out cold and I'm gonna let it drip for a long time to try to get every last drop out. Okay, now I'm going to try to drain the gas into this can without spilling any. That's a lot of gas. That's more than I was expecting. All right, I need to get rid of this old gas, and this is the safest way I know to do it. This is much better than dumping it in the ground, and it's much better for the environment than just letting it evaporate. So I'm just going to leave it here burning until it's all gone. All right, now we're gonna check the spark plug real quick. So the spark plug actually looks brand new. The exterior portion of it looks a little corroded, like it's been sitting outside. But the actual spark part, I forget what you call that, anode maybe? I don't know. The part that makes the spark looks like it's never been used. So I'm not gonna replace this, I'm just gonna put it back in. Alright, I just made a mistake. I put the spark plug wire back on the spark plug, even though I'm about to turn the machine over and take the lawnmower blade off. I drained all the fuel, but there could still easily be a little bit in there, and the machine could start from turning the lawnmower blade too quick. Make sure you disconnect the spark plug whenever you're going near the lawnmower blade. Now that all the fluids are out of the machine, now's a great time to take the lawnmower blade off and sharpen it, because I know nothing's going to spill out when I tip it up. And it feels like this blade has never been sharpened. This feels awful, just absolutely terrible. So I'm going to take this off now and run it through my bench grinder a few times and see if I can clean it up. So this is a close-up of the blade. It's pretty rusty and the paint is starting to chip. And there's lots of wide areas of rust on the bottom of it. So before I put it in the bench grinder to sharpen it, I'm going to use a wire wheel on a drill to try to scrape most of the rust off. All right, that looks pretty good. It got most of the heavy rust off and any of the loose flakes of paint. Now it's time to fire up the bench grinder. So it's much sharper after just a few passes, but the edge of the blade is still wavy and it still has some notches taken out of it. So I'm going to keep going even though it's already sharp, just to try to smooth it out a little bit. Okay, this blade is much better now. I'm just going to use a hand file and smooth it out the rest of the way. All right, now that the blade's nice and sharp, let's bolt it back on. These two zip ties that are holding the cable in place, those seem totally fine. I'm just going to cut the ends off the zip ties so they look a little nicer. It might be hard to tell on camera, but there's a lot of dirt on this lawnmower. So before I refill it with fluids, I'm just going to hose it down real quick. And I'm going to do it in this brown area of my lawn so I can sort of kill two birds with one stone. Oh, I forgot to show you the air filter, so let's look at that real quick. It's pretty clean, so I think this is fine. It's a little dirty at the bottom because that's where the oil came out and sort of dripped all over it. But I think once I use it for a while, it should dry out, and I think it'll be fine. Now, I like my yard nice and tall, so I'm going to adjust the height of these wheels to make the mower as tall as it can get. All right, I'm gonna have to compare that to my other lawnmower and see how it looks. All right, comparing the height of the one I'm fixing up to my actual lawnmower. Both blades are pretty similar in distance from the bottom lip of the housing. So in other words, the height of the housing is equal to the height of the blade on both machines. And the height looks pretty good. It looks pretty close on both of them. So I'm gonna keep this one where I just adjusted it and give it a shot. This machine came with a bag, but it did not come with a chute. So I bought it a new chute on eBay. Just snaps right in, there you go. Okay, it's time to put some fresh oil and gas in here. But before I put the oil in, I'm gonna go Google it to make sure I know exactly how much oil this thing takes. I assume it takes 20 ounces because most lawnmowers do, but I'm gonna double check the internet to make sure because I don't wanna also overfill it or underfill it. All right, there's generally two ways that a machine gets overfilled with oil. The obvious way is that somebody just puts too much in. The other way is that if the carburetor has a leak, it can leak fuel down into the cylinder, and then from there it can leak past the rings and into the oil pan. I was a little nervous that this might be leaking gas into the oil pan, but I just Googled the oil capacity, and this engine only takes 15 ounces of oil. So that pretty much guarantees that somebody overfilled this thing with oil because that is a very small amount. I've never seen a motor take so little oil before other than tiny weed whacker engines. So I pre-measured the oil in this quart, so there's exactly 16 ounces, not 15. It's not really full synthetic, it's actually semi-synthetic. I just reused this container. So I'm gonna put the oil and the gas in there and see if I can get this thing running. All right, it's full, but it's not over full. right, that was a little tough to start up initially, but once it was going, it ran pretty good. It was a little rough idling, but it wasn't too bad. So all the gas that I put in my gas can, I mix in 1 ounce of seafoam per gallon of gas. So all my gas is treated, including the gas that I just put in here. But now I'm going to put an extra ounce of seafoam directly into the tank and then top off the tank with gas. That way I can give the carburetor and the whole fuel system in this machine a thorough cleaning before I sell it. So now that the machine's running, I started it up and did a little test patch in the front lawn, and it worked great. So then to really give it a proper shakedown and to also run all that fuel system cleaner through the engine, I mowed my whole lawn with it the next day. So rather than show you the test patch, I'll just show you a few clips from the whole lawn. All right, I just mowed my entire lawn with this machine, and it actually worked really well. It just has a couple of outstanding issues I need to work on. The first is the handle. It kind of stinks, so I'm going to get a roll of black hockey tape and tape that up so it has kind of a grip to it. That will make it a lot better to use. I need to replace this flap. It's supposed to be several inches long. It must have broken. I need to figure out why the springs on this back door don't actually push it all the way down. They might be installed wrong, or they might just be worn out. And the last thing is that it still runs a little rough. Even running for an hour with a lot of seafoam in the tank, it still kind of sputters. All right, I'm going to go order a few new parts, and once they arrive, we'll go back in the basement and install them. All right, I have a roll of hockey tape, and I'm going to tape up this handle. The handle has a little bit of a crease in it, so that when you squeeze the lever, it sort of fits into that crease. So when I tape it up, I'm going to try to press the tape into that crease so it's nice and smooth and continuous. So it's going to take me a while to do this, but luckily fast forward exists, so you don't have to watch me do this in real time. I'm going to start at the middle and go all the way down one side and then back across to the other side and then back to the middle. I have a whole other video just about taping up the handles of hand tools. When you put hockey tape on the handles, it makes them so much more grippy. It makes it so much easier to use them. So I put a second layer of tape on the handle off camera because I felt like it needed a little more squish. It feels really good now. It's much easier to grip it, and it'll be much more pleasant to mow with this thing. Okay, now I need to remove this door, and the way to do that is to grab onto this rod and hammer it out that way. So the best way I can come up with to do that is to grab onto it with a pair of vice grips and then tap the vice grips with a hammer. I need to get that rod out so I can either adjust these springs or replace these springs. Okay, now that the rod is sticking out, I can try to just pull it out from the side. This rod that holds the back door on was really rusty. That made it pretty hard to remove. So I'm going to use a wire brush and scrape all the rust off of it just so it's easier to service next time. Okay, that would have been a lot easier if I had a wire brush wheel for my bench grinder, but I don't, so I had to use the hand drill. It was a lot more work, but it came out pretty good in the end. So the rear flap on this machine had a problem where the springs weren't pushing it down tightly, and it ended up being a problem with the plastic itself on the door. So what I need to try to do here is bend the springs a little bit so that they're putting additional pressure on the door so that it closes properly. So if you look real close here, this is the spring, and it's the mirror image spring on the other side. And this is the little handle that catches the body of the mower. So if I pull that out a little bit and bend a second hook further along the coil, that will essentially be pre-tensioning the spring, and that should put more pressure on the door. So I'm going to try to do that. I think it's probably easier if I pull the spring out and do it on the workbench. All right, this might be kind of hard to see, but what I'm going to try to do is bend a second hook right here and then flatten the original hook. So I undid the first hook. Now we need to add a second hook down here. That's not working so good, so I'm gonna put it in the vise. All right, those look okay. All right, now I'm going to use my Dremel to cut off the excess end of each of these little hooks. All right, I just spent about a half an hour with my vice grips and every pair of pliers I own, fine-tuning these springs so that the new hooks are as close to 90-degree angles as I can get them. All right, now I'm going to put these back in the door and put the door back on the lawnmower. That's much stiffer. That wasn't easy to do, but came out great. All right, the new carburetor has arrived, so I'm going to install that now. I'm going to replace the pull rope too, so I'm going to take the cover off now, and hopefully you'll be able to see the carburetor a little better with the cover off. There's two bolts you can see right here and here, and then there's two other bolts here and here that are black on black, so you can't really see it, but you got to take all four of them out. Now you can see the fuel line right here, and that's the whole thing. It's very short. So even though it's probably perfectly fine, because it's so short and because I have so much of it left over from snowblower projects, I'm just going to replace the fuel line too. It's really convenient that the carburetor is so close to the fuel tank. I wish that snowblowers were like that. All right, my advice whenever you're taking apart any kind of linkages is to take a photo before you start pulling things apart. That way you can look back at the photo and put things together exactly the same way they were. All right, with the air box removed and the fuel line disconnected, it's just O-rings that are holding the carburetor in place. So you pull it out and you can sort of work all these connecting rods off. All right, now I'm going to disconnect the rest of the fuel line so I can replace it. And it turns out with the cover off, the gas tank comes right out. So it's very easy to now take the fuel line off. All right, here are the two carburetors. The one on the left is the original and the one on the right is the replacement. You can tell because one of them's really dirty, the other one's nice and clean. These things look identical, so it should bolt right up and it should work perfectly. Before I put the new carburetor on though, I need to cut the new fuel line. So I'm just gonna hold the old one right up to the new one and use that as a guide to cut it right at the exact same length. Here we go. All right, there we go. Looks perfect. All right, the old fuel line, it feels fine. It probably would have been fine to use this for a bunch more years, but I have so much new fuel line that I might as well use it. It keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. All right, now I'm going to put the carburetor back on, and now is the time to reference that photo we took earlier so we can see exactly where all of these rods go. Also, this is the first all plastic carburetor I've ever seen, and I guess it makes sense because the air and fuel going through here is going to be cold. This isn't exhaust going through here, so it's not going to melt. And it's an interesting design where it's only held in place by O-rings on either side. Personally, I like everything made out of metal, not plastic, but this seems like it will work. All right, so this rod goes in there. This rod goes in there. right. All right, now I'm going to put the fuel line back on, which we can do easily on this side by just popping the tank off again. All right. This one's going to be a little trickier to see, but I need to feed that fuel line onto the side of the carburetor. All right, that's on there nice and tight. Now I need to put the air box back on. There's one tube here that connects to the vent, and then those 4 bolts go back on. All right, before we can put the cover back on, we have to replace the starter rope. So I'm just gonna undo this little hook here so I can redo the rope on the workbench instead of bending over on the floor to do it. All right, replacing the pull rope isn't too hard on these things. It's just a little bit tricky because you have to make sure the spring has the proper tension when you're winding it back up. Otherwise, when you pull to start the machine, the cord won't go back in all the way. Good thing I'm replacing this cord. It's actually in worse condition than I thought it was. It's getting pretty close to breaking. All right, so I'm gonna disconnect the handle from the rope first. It's kind of hard to see in there, but there's a knot in there that I'm trying to pull out so I can untie it. So I had to poke it through a little bit from the other side with a screwdriver just to get it loose. And now I can go in there and pull it out like so. All right, it's a small knot, but it's tied pretty tight. So we're gonna use plan B. Now the rope slides right out of the handle. Now make sure you don't let this rope go because then the spring will just wind it up. So you actually want to extend it all the way, which is hard to do with just 2 hands. So once the rope is fully extended, you need to hold the spool with one hand and you can pull the rope right out. Oh, I'm just going to stick a screwdriver in here to prevent it from winding itself up. All right, I'm going to start by just tying a little knot in the end of the new rope, and I'm going to tie it nice and tight. Now I'm holding the spool really tight and I'm going to feed the rope right back into the hole that I just pulled the old rope out of. All right, here we go. So now you just pull the rope all the way through. You can see how the knot is in there nice and tight, just like the old one. Now slowly let go of the rope. The spring in the spool is going to wind it up. You don't want to wind it up all the way because then you'll lose the end of it. So we're getting close to the end here. So I'm going to put a little miniature vice grip on the end just to make sure I don't lose it. Now I'm going to feed the other end of the rope through the handle. You kind of have to push it with a screwdriver to get it to go one way or the other. So you fight with it a little bit. Now you get all this slack. Now you can easily tie a knot in this end of the rope. And again, pull it nice and tight. You could also get a match or a candle or something and sort of melt this in place, but I don't really think that's necessary. Now I'm going to let go of that vice grip, holding the rope, and slowly feed it the rest of the way in. Now it's pretty loose right now, but that's okay because once we mount this on the mower body, you actually pre-pull the rope a little bit to mount it on the handle. All right, now we're going to grab the handle and connect it to the hook at the end of the main handle of the mower itself. Make sure your spark plug is disconnected because you don't want to accidentally start it up while you're doing this. All right, hopefully the last thing to repair is replacing this broken flap with this big long flap. All right, let's put some gas in this thing and see how good it runs with the new carburetor. So the lawnmower actually ran worse with the new carburetor than the original one. The new one must have been defective somehow, so I put the old one back in and it's running better but still not great. So what I'm going to do now is take apart the original old carburetor and clean it as thoroughly as I can, put that back together and see if that helps the machine at all. From this point on, I'm going to be showing you things a little bit out of order from the order I actually did them in. The video is going to make more sense if I show things to you in this order. So I already took the gas out of it, so now I'm just going to start taking it apart real quick so we can get down to the carburetor. There's a little bit of fuel left in the carburetor that's leaking out, which is why I put it on this plastic cover. But I'm in my basement, so I gotta go take this outside. I'll be right back. All right, here's the carburetor. The whole thing's made out of plastic. Typically, they're made out of metal, like all these. So I'm just gonna start taking this apart and laying out all the parts, and then I will spray each part and possibly soak them, and hopefully get them nice and clean. Alright. Turns out there was a lot of fuel left in the carburetor bowl that didn't drain, so when I took it apart, I spilled that gas all over my workbench. It took me a while to clean all that up, and I had to air out my basement overnight because it smelled so bad down there. But here we are the next day, so now I'm outside, and I'm going to finish taking the carburetor apart so I can clean it. Alright, I have this new can of carb cleaner that works great, and I have this older can that lost its pressurization. So what I'm going to do is stab a hole in this and just fill the bowl with the carb cleaner so I can soak the small part here, and then I'll spray out the rest of it while that's soaking. I'm going to put safety glasses on, even though I usually don't, because this stuff sprays all over the place. So only do this if you know for a fact that there's no air in here, because if I stab a normal can of this, it's just going to spray like crazy. Alright, now I'm going to spray off the main body here. The important thing here is to spray in all of the little holes, because those are the passages that the gas has to pass through, and that's what gets clogged. So this is the main jet, and it has lots of little holes, so you have to get every one. All right, I'm gonna go dump this in my outdoor fireplace to burn it off. All right, time to reassemble. So the main jet snaps in here. And if it doesn't go in, what I found out happens is there's a ring in there that sometimes rotates, and it has a hole that fits into this. So sometimes you have to move that to get it to fit in properly. But luckily you don't have to do that now. Alright, that's working properly. Now you just snap the bowl back on. All right, I'm gonna move inside where I have more light. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but the O-ring that goes between the bowl and the body of the carburetor seems to be stretched out a little bit. It doesn't have the best seal. It will have a good seal once I jam it on here. I just need to be careful about how I squeeze it together to make sure that it doesn't get pinched, make sure that the entire seal goes up into the body of the carburetor. Now the bottom is fully snug, and you can look around the edge and see that the O-ring is not squeezing in, it's not pinched in any way, it's seated in there properly. All right, nice and tight, so now let's go install this back on the lawnmower. But wait, before we reinstall the carburetor, we have to take the fuel tank off and give that a thorough cleaning, just in case there's dirt in there. All right, I'm gonna take a pair of needle nose pliers and just squeeze it in the fuel line, just to make sure no dirt gets up in there. Now, when I say I'm cleaning the fuel tank, I mean I'm cleaning the inside, but I'm gonna clean the outside just to make sure that none of that dirt falls in. All right, now I'm gonna pour some very hot water and a little bit of dish soap in the fuel tank and just shake it up like crazy. That should wash away any dirt that's inside of there. So there's a vent in this tank, and as I shake it, soapy water is shooting out the vent, so just cover that with a paper towel. So how do you dispose of dirty soapy water that might have a little bit of fuel residue in it? I'm just gonna dump it in my regular basement trash barrel, but I'm gonna leave that barrel outside tonight so that any fumes that might be in there will evaporate instead of getting into my house. I repeated this process a few times so I could get the tank as clean as possible. All right, I have what must be the world's cleanest fuel tank and the world's cleanest carburetor. So now I'm gonna reinstall them on the lawnmower. All right, it's actually a lot easier to reinstall the carburetor and the fuel tank when you're doing them together like that because you can move them around easier. All right, now that they're on there, I'm gonna throw the top cover on and the air box back on. All right, I put a lot of water into the fuel tank when I was cleaning it, and you don't want water in the fuel tank when you're actually trying to run the engine. So I'm gonna leave the air filter off, and I'm going to leave the cap off the gas can, and I'm gonna leave this lawnmower outside for a day or two and let everything fully evaporate before I put gas in it and try to start it up. All right, the last thing left to do on this machine is replace the spark plug. I just went to the closest auto parts store and bought a brand new one, so I'm gonna throw it on real quick. All right, you can see the difference between the old one and the new one. The old one is a little dirty, but it actually looks fine. I don't know if it really needed to be replaced, but spark plugs are cheap, so best to just do it and see if it makes it run better. All right, let's go start this up one more time. Now I'm going to put some fresh gas in it and see if I can start it up. I don't expect it to start up first pull because the carburetor and the fuel tank are fully drained. So it's going to take a few pulls to get the fuel up into the engine. But hopefully it runs great. So let's see. All right, this lawnmower is working pretty good, so I'm gonna call this job finished. The motor's not running 100%, but it's running pretty good, definitely good enough to use. I could keep tinkering with this motor to try to get that extra little bit so it runs 100% perfect, but I've spent enough time and money on this machine. It's time to kick it out the door and move on to the next machine. So now let's look at the price list. So the lawnmower itself I got for free off the curb, so I didn't pay anything for that. I changed the oil twice in this process, so I'm calling that $6 worth of oil. The side chute I had to replace, that was $13. About $4 in hockey tape to rewrap the handle so it's nice and grippy. I replaced the fuel line from my supplies, so I'm calling that $3. I replaced the rear flap that presses the grass down as you mow. That was $18. The starter rope was $11. I went through a can of carb cleaner, so that was $4. $5 for a new spark plug, and then $15 for a new ignition coil, but that's not actually in this video. I made a separate standalone video just for the ignition coil. So the total parts cost was $79. That's a little high. I definitely went a little overboard with this machine. It's going to be hard to make any money when I flip this. That's not really why I do it, but it might be hard to even break even because old lawnmowers like this don't go for that much money. But I'm going to try to get at least $100 or $125 for it, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, I'm just going to put this in my shed and I'm going to start using it every week when I mow my lawn until somebody comes and buys it. So if you like this machine, check out my yard work videos and you'll see it. Alright, well, I'll see you guys later.